Gene Haas owns 100% of his Formula One team. Every share, every asset on the books, the name above the door. All of it, legally, completely his. No partner holds a single percent of equity. And that, strangely, is exactly why this story is worth telling. Because a man can own every share of something and still, quietly, be losing his grip on it. Look at the official 2026 entry list, and the picture seems simple. The American team now races as TGR Haas, Toyota's name across the car, Toyota's money behind the season, and the read across most of the paddock is that Gene Haas pulled off the deal of his life. A giant manufacturer arrived to pay his bills, fund his development, hand him trained engineers, and asked for no ownership in return. On paper, it looks like the shrewdest bargain the sport has seen in years. The frugal American who got a car company to subsidize his hobby and kept the whole thing. But watch where the money actually goes, and a stranger shape appears underneath the sponsorship. If you want to understand why full legal ownership might not mean what Gene Haas thinks it means, and why the safest-looking deal on the grid may quietly be the most binding, stay with this and get subscribed, because the question here isn't who owns the team on paper. It's who owns the things that make the team actually work. To see how that gap opens up, you have to understand the way Gene Haas built this team in the first place. Because the vulnerability was designed in from the very start, years before Toyota ever appeared. When Haas entered Formula One, he did it on a philosophy no other owner would touch. Build as little as possible. Own as little as possible. Where every rival constructed factories, wind tunnels, and sprawling engineering departments, Haas deliberately built almost none of it. He bought his chassis expertise from an Italian constructor. He bought his engine, gearbox, and suspension from Ferrari. He ran the leanest headcount on the grid, the bare minimum to legally put two cars on a track. It was, for a decade, genuinely clever, and you have to understand the logic to see why he stuck with it so long. Gene Haas didn't come to Formula One as a racing romantic chasing a constructor's title at any cost. He came as the founder of one of the largest machine tool companies in the world, and the team was, in cold business terms, a marketing vehicle. A way to put his brand on televisions in every country that matters, for a fraction of what conventional global advertising would cost. Seen that way, spending hundreds of millions to build factories and wind tunnels would have been madness. Why sink a fortune into infrastructure when the whole point was to keep the exercise cheap? So he kept it lean. It kept his costs low, let Formula One's prize money cover the bills, and turned the whole team into a rolling global advertisement for his machine tool company. But there was a cost buried inside that cleverness that wouldn't come due for years. A team that buys everything and builds nothing, owns nothing underneath itself. No foundational technology of its own, no irreplaceable machinery, no deep institutional knowledge that couldn't be switched off by someone else. Haas wasn't a fortress. It was a shell, an entry license wrapped around other people's components. And a shell, by its nature, has room inside it for someone else to move in. That's the opening Toyota walked into. And Toyota, of all companies, understood exactly what that opening was worth, because it had been burned by the alternative. The last time Toyota tried Formula One, in the 2000s, it did it the conventional way. It built its own full works team out of that same Cologne factory, spent a fortune many times over, and walked away in 2009 without a single race win, one of the most expensive failures the sport has ever seen. A company carrying that memory doesn't rush to buy another billion-dollar team outright. It looks for a way to build the capability without owning the liability, to gain everything a works operation gives you, while someone else's name stays on the entry and someone else carries the risk. Which is worth being precise about, because this is where the easy story overreaches. Toyota did not buy equity. It did not seize the team, or force Gene Haas to sign away his shares, or stage anything resembling a coup. What it did was quieter, and in a way more interesting. It offered to build the parts of a Formula One team that Gene Haas had spent a decade refusing to build himself. There's a specific piece of the sport's financial rulebook that makes this possible, and it's worth understanding, because it's the mechanism the whole arrangement runs through. Formula One's cost cap limits what teams can spend on actually going racing, but it treats big physical investments differently, under a separate allowance for capital expenditure: the wind tunnels, the simulators, the manufacturing hardware. For most of its life, Haas's capital spending was close to non-existent by design. Gene Haas simply wouldn't authorize the millions it takes to build those permanent assets because permanent assets weren't the point of his operation. That restraint is exactly the gap Toyota stepped into. Start with the simulator, because it's the clearest example. For years, Haas didn't own a modern driver-in-the-loop simulator, the single most important development tool in the sport. It couldn't justify the cost, so its engineers borrowed Ferraris, over in Maranello, flying to Italy to work limited hours on someone else's machine, on someone else's schedule. As part of the Toyota partnership, that changed. A brand new simulator was funded and installed directly inside the Haas base in Banbury, coming online around the middle of the 2026 season, the first the team has ever had of its own. On the surface, pure gift, a capability Haas never had, handed over. But look one layer down, at who actually operates it. The people calibrating that simulator, writing the software that tells the digital car how to behave, correlating it against the real thing. Those are largely Toyota's people, drawing on Toyota's own simulator expertise as the reference. Haas owns the room the machine sits in. The knowledge of how to make it sing increasingly lives with the partner who built it. And that's the pattern that repeats, in one form after another, right through the deal. Because it isn't only the simulator. The partnership has quietly grown the team from the inside, its headcount climbing from around 230 people to roughly 380 over the 2 years the relationship has deepened. New engineers, new capability, a whole expanded operation. On paper, that's Gene Haas's team getting stronger. But a meaningful share of that growth, that expertise, that trained muscle, exists because of Toyota's involvement, and would have every reason to follow Toyota's involvement if it ever left. You can own the org chart and still not own the loyalty running through it. Then there's the factory question, the piece that points furthest into the future. Toyota still runs a full Formula One grade facility in Cologne, Germany, wind tunnel and all, kept warm since its last era in the sport. The clear long-term direction of the partnership is for more of Haas's engineering and manufacturing capability to lean on that German infrastructure over time. Now, this is where the draft version of this story tends to sprint past the facts, so let's be careful. Haas has not severed its existing supply chains. It still buys its Ferrari power unit. It still uses Ferrari's gearbox and suspension. It still works with its long-standing Italian chassis partner. Nothing has been ripped out. But every new capability that gets built through Toyota, rather than owned outright by Haas, adds one more thread tying the American team to a partner it doesn't control. And here's the part that has to be said plainly, because it's the honest counterweight to everything else. And the channel lives or dies on getting this right. There is no evidence of a stolen secret here. Toyota's engineers embedded in the garage are, by the team's own account, there to learn the sport and grow their people. And Haas gives its actual engine partner, Ferrari, complete transparency, with the team principle on record that there's no stepping on toes between the two. The purpose of the whole arrangement, as Toyota's leadership has stated repeatedly, is developing people, not harvesting technology. Read the most cynical version, and you might call the garage a learning laboratory for a future Toyota. Read the stated version, and it's a manufacturer training its staff in the most demanding environment on Earth. Both readings run on exactly the same facts. Nobody outside the boardroom can prove which one is true. Here's the thing, though. You don't need a stolen secret for the leverage to be real. That's the thing the equity-obsessed version of this story misses entirely. Control in modern Formula One doesn't only come from owning shares. It comes from owning the things a team can't run without. Play it out concretely. Imagine Gene Haas woke up tomorrow and wanted the partnership gone, wanted his team fully independent again. What would he actually be left holding? The simulator would still be bolted into his Banbury building, but the people who know how to run it and correlate it might not be his. The expanded workforce might thin out as Toyota Link's staff drifted back toward Toyota. The future factory capability he'd been counting on would evaporate. He'd still own the entry, the name, the license, and an operation suddenly missing the parts that had started to make it competitive. That's the quiet trap in outsourcing your foundation to a single partner. The exit door has a price on it that goes up every year, and it's the partner, not the owner, who sets that price. Slowly, capability by capability, the list of things Haas can't run without is filling up with things it doesn't actually own. And for now, none of this feels like a trap from the inside, which is exactly what makes it work. The team is more competitive than it's been in years. The money's flowing, the equipment's arriving, the results are ticking upward, and everyone in the building has every reason to be delighted. That's the nature of a dependency in its early phase. It doesn't feel like being cornered. It feels like winning. The bill for it only arrives later, at the one moment the whole arrangement was always going to come down to, which is why the number that really matters in this story isn't a share percentage. It's a date, the end of 2028, when the current Ferrari engine deal expires, and the first phase of the Toyota partnership comes up for renewal at the same time. Play the situation forward to that moment and ask what each side is holding. Toyota would have years of embedded operational knowledge, a trained trackside crew, a warm factory, and a simulator its own people run. Gene Haas would have 100% of a team that by then might depend on all of it. Now, to be clear, this is a projection, not a reported plan, and the most obvious reading of it is one Toyota flatly rejects. Its people have said, more than once, that there's no intention to build a works engine and no intention to take over the team. Gene Haas has shown no desire to sell to anyone and has said as much for years. It's entirely possible that 2028 comes and the two sides simply shake hands and continue. A genuine partnership that suited them both. That's the innocent version, and it might be the true one. Now sit with the other reading, just for a moment, because it's the one that makes the title of this whole story land. If, by the end of 2028, Haas genuinely cannot function without Toyota's simulator, Toyota's people, and Toyota's factory capability, then the negotiation over what happens next isn't between equals. One side owns 100% of an entity, the other owns the machinery, the expertise, and the infrastructure that makes the entity worth anything at all. And in that room, the share certificate on Gene Haas's side of the table is worth exactly as much as his ability to walk away from the deal, which by then may be almost nothing. So here's the uncomfortable question. Underneath the frugal American's clever bargain, Gene Haas spent a decade proving you could compete in Formula One without building your own foundation. And it worked, right up until someone else offered to build that foundation for him. He still owns every share of his team tonight. The real question is whether ownership means anything at all once someone else owns everything that makes the thing you own actually move. So tell me where you land in the comments. Did Gene Haas pull off the smartest deal in the paddock, or did he quietly hand over the only leverage that ever mattered and keep just the paperwork?